So one day I was hanging around with friends, making some fan art because I like to. And all of a sudden this came out. Yes, that's right, Blood is getting remastered twice. No joke. I guess in the wake of this recent announcement, it would at least give me an excuse to talk about my thoughts on it while I also talk about how we got there. Let's rewind back to the near end of the last decade, which is called 2019. Nightdive Studios unexpectedly announced and released a remaster for the 1997 3D shooter under the title Blood Fresh Supply. Honestly, at first sight, it sounded pretty interesting and great. It's finally a way to play this game on modern hardware without resorting to emulation or just dusting out your average beige box. But then you start to realize that this should have been done a few years early. Because here's the thing, by 2019, at the time of Fresh Supply's release, a source port by the name of Blood was already released. The main difference, however, between the two is that Fresh Supply is a recreation of the game only using reverse engineering for the file formats, while Blood is basically an eDuke32 based source port which also uses reverse engineering using debug symbols found in pre-final shareware builds. Now, this might be an unfair comparison between a commercial product developed by people for profit and a source port developed by people who had free time and effort to commit. Not to mention they weren't really getting paid for it on top of that, outside of just donations. But at the same time, there are always options, and in my case, I aim for the most accurate to the original game. And as it currently stands, Blood and its fork, Not Blood, currently has that crown. Although it's not to say that Fresh Supply is a bad option and should be avoided like the plague, it's honestly a decent option for single player if you can ignore the inaccuracies or just want to play gameplay mods like Extra Crispy thanks to the implementation of Angel Script. But personally, what gets me the most and why I stopped caring about Fresh Supply has more to do with the flaky multiplayer experience and how Atari did them dirty. Now, I know I keep bringing up multiplayer when it comes to the topic of remasters, but here's why. It's because I really care a lot about multiplayer preservation, and at times it's kind of gotten more neglected. It's also to mention that most of these games at the time, when they had multiplayer support, they were really favored towards local area networks, which nowadays is pretty much its own niche thing thanks to the internet getting so popular and the rise of online multiplayer gaming. So you're basically met with some games that pretty much translate so well on the internet or just designed for it in mind, but are also some games that have aged like milk, basically. Some games might lag because of long distance, but there are also some games that are just borderline unplayable. In Blood's case, and also based on my personal experience, Blood's multiplayer performance is pretty much decent, depending on who you play it with. And we are talking about the IPX protocol emulated through DOSBox. But in Blood Fresh Supply's case, not so much, honestly. Here are some noteworthy examples I will probably talk about, which include malfunctioning fall damage, which pretty much means you get killed for jumping out of a small elevator, and that's pretty fucked up. And another issue where hit-scan weapons don't register properly, leaving the host on a major advantage. Which is to be expected because that is a listen server, not a dedicated server. Now, for those who do not know what a listen server means, it's basically running a server on top of a client, as opposed to running a dedicated server where the server is its own instance. And because of how the dedicated server works, it has a major advantage where you can pretty much host an entire game server on an entirely different PC. In my case, I'd be hosting servers on a VPS, a rented one that is. Now, that does remind me of a certain feature that I really liked, but sadly got outweighed from its own issues. That would be the mid-game joining. In the original version of Blood, all players had to be present in order for the game to start, and that can be a bit limiting and probably discouraging to some people. Now, despite my optimism, it would be months after the remaster would come out that patches came to a halt, and that was due to some stuff with Atari, and thus Fresh Supply would pretty much remain in a broken state. Or maybe decent, but either way, the only reason to buy it at that point would be to get a hold of the original 1-unit whole blood, at least legally. Now we can get to the recent news that is called Refresh Supply. Based on the trailer scene, it claims that Fresh Supply is back, with more content like Marrow and Death Wish, which of course the latter is an add-on that many people talk about, and it's also something I should really play through at some point. I will say that the trailer pretty much comes off as misleading to a bunch of people, and I think it might be due to the focus towards additional content and nothing else. So it's like we're paying money for an update basically, and that's probably frowned upon if you think about it. However, given the stuff said by the developers on social media sites, what should have been advertised in the first place is that it's being redone from scratch, involving the original source code thanks to the involvement of Warner Bros. Some other pointers I could probably mention involve rewritten network code, and a vault that is similar to the ones you see in remasters of id Software titles. Now, another questionable trait that I've been seeing in recent times, and I gotta let this out honestly, why the fuck are these titles costing $30? Granted, I didn't have to spend that much for a pre-purchase due to a discount given to those who already own Fresh Supply. And it's also not to mention that the total amount of money I had to pay is basically the same price as the retail price of Fresh Supply itself. Let that sink in. It's strange to me because part of the blame may go to the publisher, but at the same time, Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion looks to be published by Nightdive themselves, but it also has a $30 price tag. I think I've heard something that Disney owns the property to Turok, so correct me if I'm wrong. Either way, it's basically at the point where you must either wait for a game sale or just start pimping out your pirate ship if you can. Because honestly, it's no wonder why I miss the shareware format so much. I mean, it's just strange management coming from those people. Too many projects in your hands, little time and effort to push out game patches that probably are more deserving, and probably some miscommunications left and right, I assume. Despite that, I can confirm that I am going to make a video about it since I pre-purchased it. In the future, that is. Can Nightdive really redeem themselves when it comes to Blood, or the build engine in general? Maybe, but I am not holding my breath anytime soon, and I'm keeping my expectations practically low. For now, I just recommend checking out Not Blood if you haven't already, and NukemNet for some chaotic multiplayer action. Anyways, that wraps up this rather short-ish video. Actually, no, it's almost 10 minutes actually. If you have any thoughts about this remaster, then please leave a comment below. This video's Patreon vocal shoutout goes to Kuji. Thank you as always. And as always, thank you all for watching and peace out. See ya.